On our 7th wedding anniversary, my husband held the hand of our nanny's daughter and told me she was pregnant. The child was his. His face showed some guilt, but not much. Let's get divorced. Chloe is pregnant. She just graduated from college, her beautiful life has only just begun. I can't let people gossip behind her back. I have to give her the status she deserves. I slapped the girl and angrily asked, why? There are so many men in this world. The girl's face flushed red, but her voice remained unflinching. Stella, your family has supported me for many years, and I'm grateful. But love is selfish, I can't give up my own love just out of gratitude to you. What's more, after all these years of marriage to Brian, you still couldn't bear him a child. Such a vast family fortune can't possibly go without an heir. I let out a cold laugh. Since she's so fond of picking through trash, I'll naturally give them my blessing. But as for this family fortune, I'm afraid the child in her womb isn't quite qualified to inherit it. Brian asked me for a divorce just as I brought out the final dish from the kitchen. Today was our 7th wedding anniversary. I had planned for a sweet evening alone with him, even uncorking a bottle of wine I'd been saving for years. Unexpectedly, Chloe arrived during dinner, carrying a cake and saying she came to celebrate our anniversary. I was surprised but still warmly welcomed her. Just as I set the last plate on the table, Brian, sitting across from me, spoke in a low voice, "Stop fussing and sit down. There's something I need to tell you." His expression was dead serious. Chloe sat pressed close to Brian's side, her lips pink and slightly swollen, cheeks flushed, her hands fidgeting with the porcelain spoon in front of her. The atmosphere felt strange. It seemed something had happened between them while I was busy in the kitchen. I grabbed a kitchen towel to wipe my hands, untied my apron, and joked, "Why so serious? It's like you're about to have a heart-to-heart with me." A flicker of unease crossed Brian's face, but his tone remained as calm as ever. "Here's the thing." He cleared his throat, as if struggling to find the right words. After a long pause, he finally continued, "Stella, let's get a divorce." I froze for a moment. Then instinctively replied, "What are you talking about? We have company here, aren't you afraid of being laughed at?" I felt somewhat annoyed that he would joke around like this without considering the situation. My reaction made Brian's expression turn awkward. He glanced sideways at Chloe, who was standing beside him looking extremely nervous, cleared his throat softly, then said to me slowly, "I know bringing up divorce now must be very sudden for you. I've been struggling painfully with this for a long time, but I don't want to hide it any longer." Then he took a deep breath and confessed to me, "Chloe and I are together now." My mind was struck by a thunderbolt. "You and who?" My voice rose sharply in shock. Chloe was the daughter of our former housekeeper. Her mother had worked as our maid for over a decade, earning money to treat her bedridden husband. As a child, Chloe was always dirty and scrawny. My parents pitied her and started funding her education from elementary school. Until a few years ago, when my father's factory went bankrupt, her mother left our household. At that time Chloe was a freshman in college. After my father's factory collapsed and left us with substantial debt, I continued supporting her through graduation. In my memory, Chloe was a well-behaved little girl about 6 or 7 years younger than me. She always appeared delicate and fragile. I never imagined she'd have any connection with Brian. I stared at the two of them in disbelief. Brian, however, seemed to have made up his mind. He outright grabbed Chloe's hand beside him, their fingers interlocking tightly. He said to me, "Chloe was confirmed pregnant last week, the child is mine." Perhaps the information was too overwhelming, I momentarily couldn't figure out how to react. Brian couldn't quite meet my eyes as he continued, "I know this is cruel to you, but I can't let our child be born with the stigma of illegitimacy. We've been married for 7 years, and you haven't conceived a single child. My mother pressures me daily, and the stress has become unbearable. Besides, Chloe is only 23, 7 years younger than me. She gave up a bright future to be with a married man like me. I can't betray her trust or let people gossip behind her back. I'm begging you to let go and allow Chloe and me to be together." I'll compensate you as much as possible during the property division when we divorce. His words pierced my heart like a sharp sword. All these years of marriage we'd been using contraception because we were still in the career-building phase. Then my father's factory encountered a crisis and went bankrupt. One thing after another kept happening. That's why it got delayed, and he was fully aware of the whole process. Tonight, I had planned to take the chance to discuss having a baby with him. But who would have thought he'd give me such a surprise first? It turns out, when someone is utterly speechless and furious, they actually end up laughing. Really? So how much of the property are you planning to give me then? The family business was built through our joint efforts. I wore a smile on my face, but my nails were already digging deeply into my palms. Brian was about to speak. Chloe abruptly tugged at his sleeve to interrupt him. She was terrified he might impulsively say something about dividing too much property with me. With a tearful voice, she said, "Brian, why didn't you discuss it with me first before suddenly confessing everything to Stella? You've made me look like some despicable homewrecker who interfered in your marriage." I was infuriated to the point of laughter again. I couldn't help but wonder how she defined her own identity in this situation. Does she also think the one who isn't loved is the other woman? It seems all the years we spent supporting her education really went to waste. Chloe stood up from her chair, walked over to me, and knelt down with a thud. "Stella, I'm sorry. I know no matter how I explain, you won't forgive me. It's my fault. Blame me if you must, I couldn't help falling in love with Brian. He has nothing to do with this." She sobbed, tears streaming from her eyes, red and puffy like a frightened little rabbit. I looked at the girl kneeling before me, her eyes brimming with tears yet gleaming with triumphant defiance, and raised my hand to deliver a stinging slap across her face. Hitting her was my way of expressing utter disappointment in her. Out of all the men in the world, why him? I asked her, my voice hoarse with emotion. Chloe's face instantly flushed red, but her voice remained unflinching. "Stella, I'm truly grateful for your family's years of financial support, but love is selfish. I can't abandon my feelings out of mere gratitude. What's more, after all these years of marriage to Brian, you still couldn't bear him a child. Such a vast family fortune can't possibly go without an heir." I was shaking all over with anger at her words, raising my hand to slap her again. Brian quickly stepped in front of Chloe, taking the blow himself. He shielded the girl behind him, putting distance between us. "Stella, this is all my fault. If you want to hit or scold someone, direct it at me. Don't blame Chloe, she's innocent." The scene pierced my heart like a knife. I couldn't help but sneer mockingly, "She's innocent? So you're saying you forced yourself on her? And instead of calling the police, she's willing to have your child? Truly, you two deserve each other, a scumbag and a tramp." Chloe's face turned from red to pale, her lips trembling uncontrollably. Brian's eyes gradually turned cold. "Stella, watch your language for your own sake. Don't be so vicious. Chloe is innocent and kind-hearted, she's nothing like you. To secure orders, you drank yourself into a stupor with those men in the business world, letting them drape their arms around your waist. Who knows what else you might have done? If we're talking about being shameless, no one could top you." His eyes were venomous as he blurted out the words he'd kept hidden. My mind buzzed, blood rushing to my head. Blinded by rage, I grabbed the glass from the table and hurled it at Brian with all my strength. The cup grazed his eyebrow bone before shattering on the floor, the sound of breaking glass piercing the silent space like a needle. Those jagged shards seemed to embed themselves into my heart one by one, each one a dart of unbearable pain. "Brian, you bastard." Brian's face paled for a moment, realizing he'd spoken out of turn and opening his mouth to say more. I swept all the dishes from the table and flung them at them. "Get out. Both of you, get out." I was hysterical. Blood trickled from the cut on Brian's brow, his face a mix of horror and fury as he watched me unravel. Chloe hid behind him, frozen with fear, clutching her stomach nervously. Brian's eyes burned with rage. "You're insane. Absolutely insane. I don't know what I ever saw in you. Chloe was right, you're just a shrew." Brian grabbed Chloe's hand and stormed out, slamming the door with such force that the impact struck my heart like a sledgehammer, leaving me breathless. A moment later, silence reclaimed the room, oppressive, suffocating silence, like an invisible maw swallowing me whole. All strength drained from my body, my legs gave way, and I collapsed into a chair. I desperately wanted to cry, but my stinging eyes couldn't produce a single tear. My mind was in complete turmoil. The husband who had once been so tender and affectionate had now torn off his mask of benevolence, revealing a truly repulsive true nature. The girl my family had supported for over a decade, who repeatedly claimed she was endlessly grateful to me, had already been sleeping with my husband behind my back. The memory of their fingers intertwined made my stomach churn, bringing me to the verge of vomiting. I wanted to scream, to roar in anger, but my throat felt blocked, unable to utter a sound. My heart clenched into a tight knot, even my teeth were chattering. In the end, I had misjudged people. After enduring countless difficult days and nights together, supporting him from having nothing to his current dazzling success. The figures bustling about in that modest office, the scenes of him taking all the work upon himself to save expenses, these memories remain vivid before my eyes. Yet now, he holds another woman's hand and tells me she's pregnant. My heart aches. Every fiber of my being aches. When we got married, the company had just started and had no competitive edge in the market. We had to canvass for clients ourselves. Though my family owned a small factory, it dealt with garment exports, entirely unrelated to the software industry we were venturing into. My father's connections couldn't possibly reach this field. Brian was the type who was inherently arrogant at his core. He simply couldn't bring himself to swallow his pride and negotiate business deals. So I chose to handle market outreach, while Brian took care of technology and maintenance. During those years, to secure company contracts, I often had to attend networking events. Sometimes, clients with ill intentions would deliberately put me on the spot by making me drink all the alcohol in front of me. But I had a high alcohol tolerance, better than most men, in fact. In the business world, people generally respect each other. Yet there were always those pieces of trash who used drunkenness as an excuse to take advantage of women. Occasionally, when I felt wronged, I'd vent to Brian. Hearing this, his eyes would redden with heartache. He'd hold me and swear he'd never betray me in this lifetime. But I never could have imagined that the words I spoke in bitterness would come back to pierce me like a boomerang. The air was thick with the smell of food, thick gravy snaking its way to my feet. I didn't move. A shrill phone ring shattered my thoughts. Glancing at the caller ID, mother-in-law. The ringing stopped and started again, 3 times over. Reluctantly, I swiped to answer. Her annoyed voice crackled through the receiver. Stella, what's going on? You didn't pick up for ages? Do you need something? I replied weakly. Tomorrow's the day your father needs to go to the hospital for rehabilitation therapy. Don't forget, make sure you come early. The tone was as condescending as ever, dripping with imperiousness. My father-in-law had undergone brain tumor removal surgery 2 years prior. His neurological functions were impaired, with restricted movement on the left side of his body and slurred speech. Now he requires weekly hospital visits for rehabilitation therapy. Except for the first few times when Brian accompanied his father to the hospital, I was the one who took care of everything for the next 2 years. My mother-in-law only knew how to drink and have fun. We hired several caregivers, but she was so demanding that they all quit after a short while. In the end, I had no choice but to take care of him myself, shuttling him back and forth. 3 hospital rehab sessions every week. His condition gradually improved. He could already walk short distances without a cane. I'm busy tomorrow, I have afternoon tea plans with friends, I refused outright. My mother-in-law was furious. Is afternoon tea more important than accompanying your father to his rehabilitation hospital visit? What kind of daughter-in-law are you? She never used to be like this. In fact, she used to tiptoe around me, trying to please me. But ever since my father's factory went bankrupt 3 years ago, she probably realized my family was no longer a resource she could rely on, and that I now had to live under her son's thumb. Her attitude gradually became more domineering. When I didn't respond for a long time, the woman on the phone raised her voice even louder. I don't care what you have planned tomorrow, cancel everything and take your father to rehab first. You can deal with other matters when you get back. Her attitude could be described as rigid. I took a deep breath and said angrily, "Stop calling him your dad, my father isn't him. Legally speaking, only Brian has any obligation to support you. At best, we're just relatives, and that's only during my marriage to Brian. If we divorce, do you really think you'd mean anything to me?" My mother-in-law was rendered speechless. Her voice trembled with anger as she snapped, "Stella, just you wait. This isn't over between us." She then hung up the phone in a rage. I turned mine off completely. Surrounded by the wreckage, I sat there all night. How ironic it is, I had originally planned to celebrate 7 years of marriage with my husband. Little did I know it would become the backdrop for our divorce. When dawn broke, I called the property management for cleaning services. Then I went to the bathroom to freshen up and changed into a dress. Just as I was about to leave for my parents' house, Brian came home. The moment he stepped inside, he lashed out at me in fury, "Stella, how could you be so ill-mannered? My mother is your elder, how dare you use such foul language to insult her?" My mind raced. I couldn't recall saying anything particularly offensive about his mother at all. I didn't have time for his tantrum. I walked straight to the entryway to grab my purse and car keys. He reached out to stop me. "You're coming with me right now to apologize to my mother." I shoved his hand away. "You're insane." Then I took out my high heels from the shoe cabinet. Brian wouldn't let it go. He grabbed my arm tightly and said, "Stella, divorce is between the two of us. You shouldn't take it out on my parents. They've always treated you like their own daughter. Now come with me to their house and apologize sincerely." Treating me like a workhorse, and now claiming they treated me as their own daughter? So this is how they treat their daughters. I could feel the fury bubbling up inside me. I picked up a high heel and aimed the thin heel at his forehead. "I'll count to 3. Let go of me, 1, 2. Before I could say 3, as I raised my arm high to strike him hard, Brian suddenly released my arm and dodged away. Brian stared at me in shock, cursing furiously, "You're insane, absolutely insane. A shrew like you, I want a divorce." I composed myself and enunciated each word clearly, "Divorce is fine. I want 70% of the assets." "Out of the question." Brian snapped without hesitation. "What gives you the right to take 70%? Out of guilt, at most I'll give you half. Take it or leave it. Otherwise, we can just settle this in court." I glared coldly at this despicable man. So, giving me half was already his idea of a concession. Fine, I'll see this through to the end. With that, I grabbed my bag and keys, slamming the door behind me as I stormed out. I drove back to my parents' house, only to find upon arrival that neither of them was home. Lately, there's been no end to the busyness, and I hadn't visited my parents in over half a month. When I called my dad, I learned that my mom was hospitalized, pneumonia caused by the flu. They hadn't told me because they didn't want me to worry. I rushed to the hospital in a panic. Unexpectedly, I ran into my father-in-law and mother-in-law in the parking lot. They were there for his rehabilitation session. My father-in-law sat slumped in his wheelchair, his head tilted to one side. When she saw me, there was actually a resentful look on her face, as if she wanted to scold me. I was somewhat speechless. I had taken care of this old man diligently for over 2 years, spending 3 days a week shuttling him between the hospital and home. His wife and son never lifted a finger to help. Now, just because I didn't bring him to the hospital this once, he's holding a grudge against me. As the saying goes, birds of a feather flock together, they're all a bunch of ungrateful wretches. When my mother-in-law saw me, she crossed her arms and sneered lightly, "What's the matter? Scared now? Came running to apologize? If you're willing to kneel and beg, admitting you were wrong, Brian's father and I might just forgive you. Otherwise, don't even think about stepping foot in our house again." As if I cared about stepping through their doorway. With an indifferent expression, I rolled my eyes and retorted, "If you've got something wrong with your head, take advantage of being at the hospital today to get it checked. Don't make a fool of yourself here." Without turning back, I walked toward the hospital elevators. My mother-in-law completely lost it. Her loud cursing followed behind me. Within minutes, Brian called. I immediately blocked his number. No need to guess, his mother must have gone running to tattle again. I wasn't in the mood to listen to his nagging. He used to be my husband, and for the sake of our marital bond, I could tolerate his parents. But now? To me, he's just a cheating scumbag. Did he really think I'd bow down to his parents for him? The elevator went straight to the 12th floor, arriving at my mother's hospital room. The moment I saw her, my nose tingled with emotion. "Mom, why didn't you tell me you were sick? Seeing you like this breaks my heart." My mother smiled and patted my hand. "What's the point of telling you besides making you worry more? The medical care here is excellent, and my pneumonia wasn't serious, just a few days of injections and I was fine." Tears welled up uncontrollably in my eyes. How could it not be serious? She had clearly lost a significant amount of weight and looked utterly exhausted, while my father appeared unshaven and disheveled. This was definitely no ordinary case of pneumonia. Under the pretense of needing to buy something downstairs at the hospital, I left the ward and went straight to the doctor's office. Only after speaking with the doctor did I learn that my mother had been hospitalized due to an irregularly shaped, large polyp detected in her lungs. The polyp was surgically removed, and tissue examination confirmed early-stage lung cancer. The doctor told me not to worry too much, as follow-up treatments had already been scheduled. He advised her to maintain a positive mindset and proper nutrition to aid in the subsequent treatment. After leaving the doctor's office, I crouched in the stairwell and cried for a long time. As a daughter, I hadn't even known my mother was ill. When she underwent surgery and was hospitalized, only my father was by her side. Yet in that household, I've been acting like a caregiver for Brian's father. 7 years of marriage, what exactly have I gained? I wiped my tears and returned to the hospital room, pretending nothing was wrong. For the next few days, I stayed at the hospital. My mother urged me several times to go home soon, saying my father's care was enough. I understood what she meant. Since I was married, she was worried Brian might feel unhappy if I stayed away from home every day. At that moment, I wasn't ready to tell my parents about my impending divorce. I simply said everything at home was taken care of and didn't require my attention, and my current task was to focus on her recovery. But what I never expected was Brian actually showing up at my mother's hospital room with Chloe. I had no idea how they managed to find out her room number. When the two of them walked in hand, I froze, and my mother was even more stunned. Brian frantically tried to pull his hand back, but Chloe clung to him with both hands like a vice. I hissed at Brian through gritted teeth, pushing them toward the exit. "Whatever you have to say, we'll discuss it at home. Don't disturb my mother in the hospital." Chloe looked at me defiantly. "Divorce isn't some shameful secret. Why must we go home to talk? I'm unmarried and not afraid, what are you so scared of?" She deliberately raised her voice. I lowered mine again in furious warning. "Brian, get your woman out of here now. Or I'm calling the police." Chloe persisted relentlessly. "I only came to ask you one thing. What gives you the right to take 70% of Brian's marital assets? The company is all managed by Brian. You're just a housewife, everything you eat and wear is earned by Brian. What right do you have to demand so much of the assets? You're just taking advantage of his kindness. Let me tell you, as long as I'm here, I won't let you get your way." She looked furious and full of righteous indignation, like a wronged wife confronting the mistress who had stolen her husband's affection. The hospital room echoed with my mother's excited voice. "Stella, are you going to divorce Brian?" I whispered pleadingly. "Brian, Chloe, my mom just had surgery and can't handle any stress. Can we talk outside?" At that moment, my father strode out of the hospital room. His cold eyes took in the three of us tangled together, instantly understanding everything. His sharp gaze swept toward Chloe. She instinctively shrank back, quickly releasing her grip on my clothes. My father's eyes filled with disappointment and heartbreak. After all, Chloe had been financially supported by our family for over a decade, and now she had become the third party destroying my marriage. My father's voice was icy. Is this how your parents taught you to behave? Ungrateful and shameless. Chloe's body trembled slightly. Meeting my father's gaze, she instantly flushed with shame. She muttered defensively, "Uncle, feelings can't be forced. Brian and I are genuinely in love, I haven't done anything wrong. As for the money you previously gave me, I can pay it all back to you eventually." My father snorted coldly twice but didn't bother responding to her. Instead, he turned to look at me. "What do you plan to do?" His voice was cold, but his eyes were full of heartache. I let out a bitter laugh. The woman he's been seeing outside our marriage is already pregnant and came to confront me. What else could I do but divorce? My father then asked, "How are you planning to divide the assets?" I said, "I intend to take 70% of the marital property." My father nodded. "That's perfectly reasonable. The startup capital for that company came from me in the first place. Giving him 30% is practically charity." Chloe cried out again, "How dare you? That's Brian's company. What right do you have to take 70%? My father shot her another sharp glare. She reluctantly fell silent but continued muttering under her breath. My dad raised his hand and slapped her hard across the face. "You're worse than an animal. This slap is on behalf of your mother, since she doesn't know how to discipline her daughter, I'll do it for her." Chloe froze in terror. Brian immediately stepped forward and pulled Chloe behind him. "Dad, let's talk this out properly. What kind of behavior is hitting someone?" Though his words sounded accusatory, his voice was as faint as a mosquito's buzz. He still harbored some fear and respect toward my father. There was a time when he groveled and fawned over my dad just to marry me. Later, after we got married, my father invested $3 million as seed money for our company. Back then, he was practically ready to kneel and kowtow to my dad in gratitude. My father's voice carried an unshakable authority. "Brian, for the sake of the marriage you once shared with my daughter, I don't want this to get ugly. Take 30% of the assets and leave. Otherwise, even if it means spending every last penny I have left, I'll make sure you never know peace. You know I keep my word. I'd rather drag us both down than let you trample over my daughter." My eyes grew hot as tears welled up. Brian's face turned ashen, but he finally gritted his teeth and nodded. He understood perfectly well what my father's words implied. My father continued, "I want the divorce papers by tomorrow at the latest. If you dare play any tricks with the agreement, you'll regret it." After a pause, he added, "Oh, and Chloe mentioned repaying all the financial support I'd provided over the years. I'll prepare a detailed statement for her tomorrow. Fortunately, I've kept thorough records of those transactions." Chloe swayed slightly, nearly losing her balance. Brian caught her just in time, preventing her from falling. A month later, Brian and I finalized our divorce. Following the terms of our divorce agreement, we divided our assets. Brian wanted the company. He proposed trading all his remaining assets for my shares. I agreed without hesitation. All I wanted was my rightful 70%. He scrambled to gather funds, even borrowing over $10 million, before finally transferring my share to me. It had already been over 3 months since our divorce. Brian temporarily rented an apartment, waiting for his company's profits to turn around. With the money I received from the divorce settlement, I used part of it to buy a new villa. I had thought that after divorcing Brian, I would go through a painful transition period. But there were simply too many things happening. I didn't even have time to grieve. I took my parents on a trip for a while, and after returning, I busied myself decorating the villa and tending to flowers and plants. Every day felt packed with endless tasks. Time flies, and before I knew it, more than half a year had passed. Chloe gave birth to a pair of twins, a boy and a girl. I didn't deliberately inquire about it, but Brian threw a lavish banquet. He even hosted a 2-day celebration in the square at the entrance of their residential complex, hiring live bands and influencers to liven up the event. Nearly half the city knew about it. But the news didn't stir a ripple in my heart, because I was busy preparing to start my own company. After discussing with my father, I decided to return to his old profession, opening a thermal underwear factory, with a sideline in yoga wear. This way, we'd have products to sell year-round. This time we're focusing on the domestic market. Dad has decades of experience in factory management and garment production. I've hired him as my production consultant. We also recruited 2 talented young designers from the industry with competitive salaries to build our sales team. They're respectively responsible for e-commerce and offline sales. The offline sales team mainly focuses on market outreach and partnerships with supermarkets. In the initial e-commerce phase, we primarily supply products to livestream hosts or other e-commerce companies. We don't do retail ourselves, focusing instead on wholesale or dropshipping. Perhaps because it's familiar territory, the clothing factory has been running smoothly. Although it's not like Brian's previous software company where each deal could be worth hundreds of thousands or even millions, clothing is one of life's basic necessities: food, clothing, shelter, and transportation. As long as operations go well, it promises steady, long-term returns. Another winter has arrived. Our thermal underwear suddenly saw a sharp increase in sales thanks to endorsements from multiple influencers. Our online store kept receiving new orders, and we had to triple our workforce. Just before winter, a friend came to my factory to pick out thermal sets as gifts for her family elders during the spring festival. After selecting them, she sat in my office drinking gongfu tea with me. During casual conversation, she mentioned that Brian's father had passed away 2 days prior. She said, "I'm telling you, Brian's dad just died the day before yesterday." The whole house reeked of death. I was rather shocked. Although his father had suffered brain nerve damage and had mobility issues, his health had been relatively stable. How could he have passed away so suddenly? A friend said, "I heard the bedsores all over his body had festered, and he died in excruciating pain." Brian abandoned his father at home without care or concern, taking his mother away to look after that Chloe and the twins. His mother would return home once a week to cook meals for the entire week, storing them in the fridge so his father could heat them up himself. At first, his father could still move, but later, I heard he couldn't even get out of bed. He would cry out from hunger every day at home, until one day, the cries suddenly stopped. The neighbors, worried something had happened, called the police. When they arrived, the man was already dead, and the room reeked of an unbearable stench. That's truly tragic. I was stunned. My friend continued, "There's more. What's even more outrageous is that before the old man was even buried, Brian's mother already had her next man lined up. She'd been waiting for him to die for years and had been seeing someone else for the past 2 years. I recalled those 2 years when Brian's father was ill. His mother truly showed no concern, she never cared about his condition. Instead, she dressed up lavishly every day, leaving early and returning late. Perhaps she had already been seeing someone else back then. I suppose Brian takes after his mother." I listened to this story without giving it much thought. After all, whether my ex-husband's family lived or died had nothing to do with me. 2 more months passed. Brian came to see me. The factory security didn't recognize him, so he claimed he was here to inspect goods, signed in at the gate, and entered. He found his way to my office. At the time, I was discussing the design of the new spring-summer yoga wear collection with the designer. When I saw him peeking around the office door, looking sneaky and suspicious, I snapped, "What are you doing here?" Brian immediately plastered on an ingratiating smile. I told the designer to make some revisions and that I'd get back to her later. Brian escorted her to the door, then closed it behind her. I stared at him coldly. The once high-spirited man now looked haggard, his clothes wrinkled and unkempt. "Stella, I came to you this time to ask for a favor." I remained completely silent. He gave an awkward laugh and continued on his own, "My company is facing some difficulties." Several major contracts that expire next month won't be renewed, they've gone to other software firms. Could you go talk to them for me? I can lower prices by another 10%. So that's the plan. You're perfectly capable of negotiating this yourself. What does this have to do with me? I said mockingly. A look of regret crossed his face. Last year, I offended the heads of 2 of those companies. The market hasn't been good these past couple of years, and they originally asked me to lower my service fee by 10%, but I outright refused. Now that their contracts are up this year, both of them decided not to renew. I don't know what happened, but after that, several other big clients also chose not to renew when their contracts expired. I had no idea it would turn out like this. If I'd known, I would have given in on that 10%. These clients were all ones you originally brought in, could you help me talk to them? I'm willing to lower the price now, and don't worry, once it's done, I'll make sure you get your cut. What an idiot. Over the past 2 years, many software service providers have proactively lowered their prices. His software company isn't like those international firms with irreplaceable systems. What on earth was he so proud about? I smiled faintly. His eyes immediately lit up with hope. I said with a laugh, if you're here to order thermal underwear, you're very welcome. But as for other matters, no discussion. Those things you mentioned have nothing to do with me, and I don't understand how you even have the nerve to come see me. Remembering the insults he once hurled at me, I reminded him, after all, you were the one who said that people who seek business deals like this are low class. Why would I rush to do something like that? Brian looked like he was about to cry. But I had no patience for his melodramatic performance, so I called security and had him thrown out. After Brian left, I looked at the order information sent by the professional manager I had hired and laughed out loud. Long before my clothing factory stabilized, I had partnered with a friend to register a software company, though my name didn't appear in the shareholder information. The company's business scope was basically the same as Brian's. Over the past 2 years, I had gradually poached several capable software engineers from his company. Most of those orders had essentially been snatched away by me. Now he wanted me to help him negotiate. Wouldn't that mean having me steal business for myself? Brian's company filed for bankruptcy liquidation 2 years later. The office was sealed shut, and even the desks and chairs were repossessed by the loan company to settle debts. Meanwhile, I had begun a new relationship with a university physics professor, who was also remarried. I heard he had parted ways amicably with his ex-wife, who remained at a physics research institute abroad. She never returned to China and eventually settled down there, remarrying overseas. We were introduced through mutual friends. He was socially awkward yet humorous, quite the contradiction, right? But once you met him and exchanged a few words, you'd find these traits coexisted perfectly within him. We didn't talk much in daily life. He was immersed in physics research while I was occupied with factory management. When he had holidays, I would make time to accompany him on outings to unwind. 2 years into our marriage, I became pregnant. During a prenatal checkup at the hospital with my husband, we unexpectedly ran into Brian and Chloe. They were running alongside an emergency transport vehicle, weeping uncontrollably. Inside lay a 5 or 6-year-old boy covered in blood. The transport vehicle rushed straight to the emergency room. When the operating room doors closed behind him, the couple collapsed at the entrance, wailing in despair. After finishing my checkup, I overheard people discussing how a 5 or 6-year-old boy had fallen from a building and was brought to the hospital, but unfortunately didn't make it. Suddenly, the scene of Brian and his wife pushing that little boy in a stroller flashed through my mind. Could it have been their child? It wasn't until later that I heard the full story. They said Chloe and Brian's mother neglected the children, caring only about having fun. They locked the 2 little kids at home alone just so they could go out. There was hardly any food in the house. In the afternoon, the starving children couldn't take it anymore and tried to look for their mother. But the phone just wouldn't connect. Remembering something he'd seen on TV, the little boy thought he could slide down the tree outside the window to reach the ground floor. He decided to try it. Brian's family lived on the 4th floor, and conveniently, there was a large tree not far from the window. The little girl moved a stool. The boy climbed onto the windowsill. But then his foot slipped, and he fell straight down from the balcony. The little girl burst into terrified wails, leaning halfway out the window while crying and screaming, "Brother! Brother!" Only then did people below notice. A neighbor called the police, who forced the door open. Everyone then discovered the little boy had fallen into the greenbelt behind the building. So I immediately called for an ambulance and also notified Brian and his wife. After hearing this, I was so shocked I couldn't speak for a long time. A living life had been destroyed just like that by their family. I remembered the glory when the 2 children were born. The current outcome makes one sigh with sorrow. Later, Brian and Chloe divorced, with custody of their daughter going to Brian. Since her son's death, Chloe had fallen into a state of half-madness. She would constantly look for her son. Brian's mother was directly driven out of the house by him. She was never allowed to return. So she went to find her old flame. But when the man's children found out, they firmly opposed their relationship. The 2 secretly went to a hotel. They were caught red-handed by the old man's daughter, and Brian's mother's clothes were thrown out of the hotel window. In the end, the hotel staff found some clothes left behind by other guests in a room for her to wear, so she could walk home. After this incident, it was said that she left. As for where she went, no one knew. About 2 years later, I happened to see Brian once on the street. At that time, my husband was carrying our daughter, and I was holding his arm, preparing to go to the mall to buy some supplies for her. We came face to face with Brian. His mouth opened slightly as if he wanted to greet me. But I continued talking to my husband, occasionally playing with our daughter. I didn't even glance at him. There seemed to be a muffled sob behind me. But I couldn't hear it clearly because it was drowned out by my daughter's infectious giggles. I wouldn't look back. Because my happy life is ahead of me. Ahead of me.